Okay, hi everybody. I'm Richard Dansky. I am a 26-year veteran of the video game industry, and then many years before that of tabletop role-playing and LARP. I have worked for Ubisoft and Red Storm. I have worked for Crytek. I have worked for Romero Games. I have done some side projects for the companies that I'm technically not allowed to talk about. And I am here today to talk to you about my book, The Video Game Writer's Guide to Surviving an Industry That Hates You, and how to use it. Okay? Why am I up here in front of you? The notes actually, why am I standing in front of you today, but I am not standing. It was a long drive.
Live edit.
Yeah, that would mess up the camera there, so yeah. I'm flexible. But why am I here? Well, like I said, 26 years doing this. I have worked on somewhere, depending upon whether you believe Moby Games or not, between 60 and 80 video game titles in some capacity or another. I have worked on huge hits like The Division and The Division 2 and the original Far Cry, if you want to go all the way back, and most of the Tom Clancy games for a very long period of time. I have worked on complete and utter flops like Freedom First Resistance. I have worked on big games. The Division took something like 8 years and had teams on multiple continents, and I don't even want to think about how many people were on that team. But it was a great team, actually, one of my best experiences as a game writer. I have worked on very small games. For example, the Orpheus device, which was basically a 5-person team for an audio-only game for the Alexa and related devices. I have worked on weird games like that. I have worked on huge franchises. I have worked on IPs ranging from Scream to Tom Clancy to Vampire the Masquerade. I have worked on IPs that I have helped build from the ground up. And I worked on pretty much anything that came along because I'm always interested in storytelling in the game space. It's something that I believe in, it's something that I want to do well, it's a craft that I want to advance. And so, over my career, I have embraced every opportunity and every challenge, except for maybe when they wanted me to write about Chicago. And, but we'll get to that another, but as such, I have this very broad range of experience on multiple genres, multiple games, teams from tiny to huge, and I have built up a wealth of experience. I have also served as a game designer, as the manager of the video game design group at Red Storm for 7 years. I was the central Clancy writer for Ubisoft, overseeing the lore of the Tom Clancy's franchise for roughly 23 years, depending upon how you count it. I have been a narrative director, and I have been a member of management, which was a very strange fit for me. And at one point I got told I would get fired if I didn't stop using big words in my emails to the management group. But in any case, I was also one of the founders of the IGDA Game Writers SIG way back in the day. I've been an advisor for GDC and the Game Narrative Summit since before it was part of GDC, back to 2007. I have run Game Narrative Roundtables at GDC since 2007. I ran the narrative track at East Coast Game Conference, and will be helping put together the Future Fest Connect conference in Durham next year. And so I've seen some stuff. And more importantly, I've seen the mistakes. I have seen the ways in which this industry has treated writers badly, and I want to do something about that. So let's start with the title. The first question I get about the book is always, wow, that's a really weird title. Don't you think it's a little aggressive? Yes, I do, and that's deliberate. To be honest, the working title of this book was McDonald's French Fries, on account of it being so salty. But I deliberately picked the word hate, because, like I said, I've been doing this for 26 years, and I have seen some stuff. And it is my considered opinion that this industry does in fact hate writing and writers. I'm not saying that the individuals in it, by and large, hate it. I have worked with thousands of devs over the years, and 99% of them have been great. And when I've talked to them and gotten them excited about what we're doing on the narrative side, they were on board and they wanted to collaborate, and I've had some fantastic experiences with my fellow devs. But the industry is set up to systematically devalue writing, to make it harder for writers to do their work, to make it impossible to do good work, and then to blame the writers for it. And I have a very slow temper, but after about 25 years, I finally had it. And this stuff has to stop. It has to stop for the sake of us writers. It has to stop for the sake of the games, so we can get better writing in it. It has to stop for the sake of the teams, so we can be more productive, work better together, make better games together. And it has to stop for our fans, for the players, because we want to give them the best experience possible. And we want to be in a position to keep doing this because we don't hate our lives and our jobs, and keep making great stuff for them. Everybody on board with that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, but yes, I have seen what I can only describe as hatred. I have seen, hey, we're going to the studio Thursday, can you write the game this week? Okay? I have had calls from studio management saying, we just came up with a new feature. Can you write 300 lines for it while you're in the studio recording other stuff? I have seen schedules crunched. I have seen narrative documents take 6 months to get reviewed. I have seen scripts that need to be turned around in a week take a month and a half to come back. And then the writers get blamed for what to produce. I will say this, I have worked on way too many games where because of scheduling, because of crunches, because other departments may be slipping when other stuff couldn't slip, first draft stuff went into the shipped product. And I write a really good first draft, but it's still a first draft. So I don't want that to happen anymore, which is why I decided to write this book. And let me unleash it. And my thought was, I have been doing this for a very long time. I have seen this stuff. And one of the things that I've seen is that we do not have a shared body of knowledge as writers. Writers are very much siloed. Writers are very much isolated from other peers in the community. And furthermore, there is nothing out there on how to do the job. Even if you take classes at a school like DigiPen, where they're doing a great job on how to be a game writer, what they're going to teach you is how to write, how to produce the deliverables. Nobody comes into this industry knowing how to do the day-to-day of the job. That body of knowledge did not exist. Nobody was there to teach it. Nobody was in a position to teach it. Nobody was in a position to share it. And nobody thought, honestly, that it was worth sharing. And so the same mistakes got made over and over and over again. And every writer I talked about, oh, I thought that was just me. So what I decided to do was put together this book of how to do the job day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute. How to put yourself in the best position to be a working game writer and do your best work for yourself, for the team, for the game, for the players. And what that meant was taking all these years of experiences, the good ones and the bad ones, and there are a lot of bad ones, and putting them in a place where positive lessons and actionable stuff could be taken from it. To build a foundation of knowledge on how to do the job, how to build feedback loops and get good feedback that was usable in a timely fashion, how to interact with other departments and get them on board with narrative and collaborate with them to make stuff that was better for the whole game, on how to work in the recording studio, because nobody teaches you how to work in the recording studio, on how to write stuff and pitch it in a way that will get read as opposed to dismissed, on how to deal with things that are negative and maybe hard to work with. None of that stuff was out there, and it needed to be. And so I decided, in my arrogance, to do that. And let me say, I don't think this book is the be-all and end-all. I do not think this is absolute solutions. What it is 25 years of my experience and the solutions I have found and the paths leading forward that have led to better things that I am putting out there for people to read and share and then take and apply to their own situations and come up with their own unique solutions based on that. But we had to have a starting point. we had to have a conversation starter. We had to have a shared vocabulary and a shared base of knowledge and a shared language we can all agree on, and we can say, hey, I'm not alone. Hey, I'm not the only one they're doing this to. Hey, I have this knowledge, and let's share it. And I never thought there was any value to hoarding this knowledge. I never thought there was any value to sitting on it like Smog in the Lonely Mountain, because what good does it do? At the end of the day, I'm a gamer too. I love playing games. I want to play great games. If I can help you write better games that I can then play, it's a win for me, right? It's a win for all of us. And so that is why I wrote the book. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes. IGDA rises all ships.
Yeah. So, that's why it's there. And I jokingly tell people that this book took me 25 years to write and 6 months to type, and that's a lie. It took me about 4 months to type. I started it on a writer's retreat with some friends of mine. We're all horror novelists, and we rented a beach house in North Carolina, and I would get up in the morning and I would have 4,000 words down every day before they had gotten out of bed and had breakfast. And then in the afternoon they wandered around like, let's do stuff. No, we're ready. But that's neither here nor there. Okay, so let's talk about this. And originally this book was going to be a little bit more of a roman à clef. There was going to be a little more spilled tea. And as I started writing it, I realized that was not going to be helpful to anybody. I mean, okay, it'd be kind of cathartic to me, it'd probably be kind of funny to some folks, and might get some legal departments angry at me, but it wouldn't do any good. And so everything in this book is about, here's something that happened, here's the positive we can take away from it, all right? And so let's start with the basic assumption. This is a book about how to do the job of being a game writer, right? Yes?
All right, so something that's been kind of itching at me for a while is you mentioned that you've worked on like gargantuan projects, and then you've worked on like 5-person projects.
Yes.
How strong is the difference between those like team differences? Does it depend on like the director, and do you necessarily have more or less control? Like how do these experiences vary?
Okay, I'll dive into this more at the end when we do a formal Q&A.
Okay.
But let me say that the smaller the team, the faster the velocity generally. And the fewer people you have to have signing off, and the fewer people get upset if they're not asked to sign off on stuff, even if they don't want to read it and sign off on it. But sorry, this is going to be kind of a salty talk. Okay.
I mean, considering the title, you seem to have garnered almost as much salt as the Dead Sea, so.
Well, like I said, we have reduced the salt, actually. Okay, but so the basic assumption is, it's a book on how to do the job being a game writer. And here's the secret they don't tell you. Writing is only a part of the job, okay? It's the sexy part, it's the fun part, it's the cool part, it's the creative part, but it is only a part of the job. And I am here to tell you that if it is the only part of the job you do, the only part of the job you take interest in, the only part of the job that you apply yourself to, you are screwed, okay? Because the best writing in the world will not help you if you cannot communicate to the rest of the team why that writing is good. The best writing in the world will not help you if you cannot communicate to the creative director why a scene needs to be there, why cutting a character is bad, why this stuff is there, if you do not communicate the professional needs and value of your craft. It will not help you if you cannot talk to the art department and get them to read the character description that you've written up so they can make that character look like the character that you have written and written all their dialogue for. And it goes on and on and on. And if all you want to do is sit in a dark corner and write, it's really hard in games. That's what fiction is for. And I say that as somebody who's published 8 novels. In games, the job of being a game writer is so much more than just writing. And you have to learn all of the other stuff. And you have to do all the other stuff constantly and well so that your writing has the best chance to succeed, right? And small digression here, okay? We've all seen all the reviews, they go, oh, the game writing is terrible, right?
Yeah.
And I found most of the time the problem is not with the writing. The problem is that there are a great many steps in between the writer and the presentation to the player. Or to put it another way, how many people here ever saw Mel Gibson's version of Hamlet? Okay, I don't think I'm going out on a limb here when I say it sucked. Okay, is that the fault of the writing? I'm pretty sure Shakespeare remains a good writer, even if Mel Gibson turned his dialogue into hamburger. The problem is not the writing, the problem was the presentation of the writing with Hamlet as Sergeant Riggs from the Lethal Weapon series. But the thing is, that's the basic issue there. That's the basic explainer there that gets people to think. But there's so many ways the writing can be damaged on its way from your keyboard to the players. And you have to shepherd it every step of the way, or this stuff can happen. You have to make sure that you walk it through the approval process, because you can have people above you decide to do rewrites without telling you. And that often makes things worse because they may not be writers. You have the recording process, whereby there may be bad acting. There may be bad directing. There may be bad recording. There's a whole lot of things that can go wrong in the recording process. Bad takes may be selected. There is the implementation of the audio in the game. There is one game that I worked on that relied 100% on snappy dialogue. The lines had to come fast, 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 fast. It was modeled on 1940s cinema, and so it had to be fast patter. The team, however, put the lines in the game with a full second of dead air in between each one.
That's
It-
brutal.
That did not go well, no.
Are you allowed to name the game?
That one, no.
Okay.
Another game was, okay, I will name this one, it's called Blazing Angels. It was a World War II air combat game. And we had BARCs, systemic dialogue, for air combat. Every time a bullet hit, there was a line triggered saying, hey, I shot him, or something to that effect. And the problem was that they designed it badly so that every time a bullet hit, a line triggered. And it took about 10 bullets to take down a plane, and there were about 10 to 15 lines in the pool, so literally every time you shot a plane down, you got all the BARCs, one on top of each other, and people didn't like the writing. So, and apologies to the team, the guys in Bucharest did a great job on the game. It's a lot of fun to play, just even as the writer on that kind of turned the sound down. But and you know, there's a lot of ways it gets broken in between the writer and the player, and so that's the early step. That's the first lesson. You got to stay with your writing all the way through to make sure it's good. You have to bring it to people who are doing approvals in a way that they understand why you did what you did. You have to bring it to the recording studio with good notes for casting, with good notes for direction, with stuff the actor can use and pick up and run with. And you have to be there to make sure that, if you can, that they're using the good takes that convey what you want. And on and on and on it goes. And that already is a huge step outward from writing, right? So that's where it starts. Now let's talk about something else, the actual task of writing. Because, like I said, first drafts shouldn't happen in a shipped game. What that means is iteration and feedback. And one of the things you have to do as a writer is train the people you're working with to give you good feedback. And there's about 3 chapters in here on this. The point is that nobody should be putting first drafts in the game. You want to write your stuff and get it looked at and get it maybe read at a table read if you're doing voice, and get feedback so you can iterate and polish and get better and better and better. And a lot of times there's a lot of people who want to give feedback, or who want to have given feedback, who don't want to give feedback because that's work, and who don't know how to give good feedback, who don't know how to direct you towards what they want. And so part of your job as a writer is building these effective, useful, efficient feedback loops, okay? So work with your producer here to tighten the loop of who is giving you feedback. That's the first thing you do. Make sure it's not 20 people and then you're waiting on the 20th person who is on vacation to give you feedback on a one-page script that needed to be recorded 2 weeks ago. 2, set deadlines. The dreaded phrase, if you do not answer by this date, we will assume approval, is going to make people's heads explode. But what will happen every time is that they will miss that deadline. You'll say, okay, we're considering this approved, and they will learn their lesson. They'll actually get your feedback next time. And 3, train people how to give you stuff that's actionable. One of the dirty secrets of feedback is that a lot of people are actually really good at figuring out if something's not working. What they are terrible at, and this includes a lot of writers, is pointing out what exactly is wrong. And if they give you something prescriptive, a lot of times that's not actually the issue. The real issue is underneath. And you have to poke at it and prod at it and ask some questions and go back and try and experiment. But you have to learn to use the feedback effectively for you. So get the feedback. Say, if multiple people say, hey, there's a problem with this line or this scene, then you know there's something real there and you can do your own surgical probing to find it. If one person says, I would rather use the word pusillanimous here, then maybe you could ignore it. And what I try and teach the folks that I work with to do is give feedback that is actionable. And in turn, when I am giving feedback to junior writers that I am working with, I want to make sure it is not prescriptive, it is actionable. I never say, unless we are crunched for time and we're going to the studio tomorrow, do this. What I say is, hey, have you thought about this? Or this phrasing implies this other stuff. Is that what you want to do? And that's the sort of feedback you want to give. You want to give the people who are actually doing the writing the tools and the space and the direction to do their own work and come up with their own solutions because, again, here's another dirty secret. They should be there because of who they are. They are not there to be your pair of hands. They are not there to read your mind. They are not there to translate what you are thinking onto the page. They are there to bring their own unique experience and talent and wordsmithing skill and style to this game and bring something you don't have so you have something bigger and better, all right? So setting people up to find their own solutions, to address the problems you're finding, but solve them in their own way makes everybody happier, makes for better content. At the same time, training people up. I know that's a dirty word in business. You got to do it. Training people up to give good feedback. Tell them when they give you stuff that's useful. Explain, hey, this is very helpful here. Could I get more feedback like this? When they give you something that's not actual, say, hey, this kind of puts me in a box. Would it be okay if I do this? And give them positive feedback on when they give you good feedback. Respond to that. Make sure that they do that more. And push back gently and politely on the stuff that is not good. And that ranges from, hey, maybe this is a little granular for you as creative director to be getting into because it's an adverb. To okay, that idea messes up the whole game, and I think implementing it might not be the best thing. You don't want to run, you don't want to scream, you don't want to bash your face into the wall. What you want to do, again, is respond effectively to that. And that takes us to the next thing that is a big part of this book, which is how to talk to other teams, other departments, other disciplines. And one of the truths that we have to deal with is that very few people out there speak writer. They don't understand what we do professionally because they have not been trained to do it. It's not their job to understand it. They don't understand it to the level we do. They do not see things instinctively the way we do because we've been doing this for our whole professional lives. And that is not their fault, and that is not a bad thing. But what it does mean is that you can't present something to them expecting them to understand it on that level. To expect them to have that deep down instant grasp of narrative structure and character voice and things like that, because they don't have that. They think of something cool and they want to stick it in, and they don't understand why it's not good or why it has an impact down here or there, and all of a sudden we're writing 5 new cutscenes and it's costing another $1 million. And so That's where you have to learn how to speak to people as a writer in a way that they will listen and act on it and get excited about it, all right? And we'll start with producers. What language do producers speak? They speak the language of money and schedule. And so, if you're going to a producer saying, hey, this is a bad idea, you don't want to say, that really undermines the character development we did on mission 4, and they said this thing in mission 5 that this sort of contradicts, and they're really not going to understand or frankly care most of the time, because it's wordy. And if you do that too much, you run the risk of being described as precious, or writerly, or an artiste, or a snowflake, or someone who is not a good team player. And these are all ways to avoid engaging with you, actually raising legitimate concerns, just in a way that people don't want to deal with. So you have to raise it in a way they understand that can make your point. And so when you're talking to a producer, you don't say, this is a bad idea for a scene. You say, okay, if we do this scene, it's going to require these 4 other scenes, which is going to take an extra 2 weeks of writing time minimum, plus 2 more actors, plus this much money, plus, and when you phrase it in that context, particularly if you then follow with, but if we do it this way, we save all this money, and this is the way I want to do it, you have a win, and you build a bridge. And by explaining to them in a way they understand and how you are thinking of the benefit of the game, not just how pretty your words are, you build cred. And that helps later and later and later as you go further into the project. They trust you, and so when you do raise stuff, they're inclined to listen. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about artists. We always have to work with artists, and that's great. Artists are great. I love working with artists because as a fiction writer, working with artists on video games means I never have to do another descriptive passage ever again, all right? I don't have to describe the room. That's what artists are for, and they're great at it, and I love them for it.
This is specifically talking about like visual artists or like, because there's a lot of types of artists.
All artists.
Okay.
Okay, I love concept artists, I love level builders, I love texture artists, I love character modelers. Working as a writer in games lets me help create stuff I could never do on my own. And I really appreciate everything everybody else brings to the table in conjunction with me. I like being a small cog in a giant machine that does all this stuff because it's making stuff I could never make on my own, and it's cool, and it's bringing my writing to people that never would have seen it otherwise. I love all of that, and I love working with artists who are cool and want to collaborate, and I want to make sure that I speak to them in a way that makes them want to collaborate. So, what that means in a functional sense is speaking to artists in artist. It means not giving them a character write-up that is 3 pages and 5,000 words in one single paragraph that they will never read. It means not writing a character bio that is 99% on the character's personal history and stuff the player will never see, and nothing on what they look like or what they dress like or things like that. It means giving them short, punchy bits of text supported by visual reference that they can get on board with, and writing in a way that they can get excited about, and they can turn around and show their stuff back to me as a writer, you as a writer, in a way that builds collaboration. And that way they are happy to work with you. They are getting what they need to do their jobs, and you're doing things in a way that is not prescriptive to them, not trying to turn them into a pair of hands. It is giving them freedom by giving them basically these starter prompts and saying, go wild. And that really works very well, and you get great results doing that. And on top of that, one of the things that I've always tried to do since I've gotten to a more senior level is whenever I've been on a project, I have made sure to do what I call story time. And story time is talking to the producer and creative director about, at team meetings, carving out 5 minutes, 10 minutes to tell some of the story of the game to the whole team. It is a way to say what we're doing as a narrative team. It's a way to get people excited about it, a way to get them on board, a way to trigger them thinking about stuff and things they can add from their disciplines to tell that story better, to add to that story. And what I would do, honestly, is, get on the team's call and I put on a funny hat, and for a while it was a fez with a Sasquatch on it. But I varied it up as the years have gone by. But the point was to get it out there. One of the things that happens to writers a lot is we get siloed. We get shoved off into a dark corner, and to be honest, a lot of us like being in that dark corner where nobody's bothering us, but we do our work and then we are expected to slide the pages under the door and not talk to anybody. And so nobody knows what we're doing, and they're not excited about it, and they're not invested in it, and they're doing their own thing without any collaboration with us, without any synthesis with us, without any synergy. And that's bad. That's really bad. And that's how you end up with characters in games who look nothing like the way they're described in the dialogue in the game, which inevitably leads to fast rewrites. That is how you end up with levels that don't have a good place in the story. That's how a lot of bad stuff happens. So, story time. Do this as best you can on your teams as a writer. Share what you're doing. Get it out in front of people. Tell the story. People like listening to stories. And if your story's good, they're going to want to hear it, and they're going to get excited about it, and they're going to want to add to it. All right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did have one quick question about the artist. So like you said, like, love work for them, love when they're kind of like adding story to your story to a couple of things. When it doesn't align well and you kind of like have to go through that iterative process, what guidance would you give on like, hey, I like this, but kind of like, can we go through this other direction for like this character design, for example?
Something like that, you start with conversation. Hey, here's what I was thinking, and here's why I was thinking it. And here's what that leads to in the dialogue and further stuff down the road. You've gone this direction, what were you thinking? Let's see if we can find a place where those can intersect and work together. You never want to run off into the weeds and do it by yourself. You never want to make independent decisions, and you don't want to let them do that either. So if it becomes an intractable problem, it makes perfect sense to bring a producer in and say, hey, we've got a conflict here, can you help us resolve this? And honestly, what happens 9 times out of 10, they say, art's more expensive to fix than words, fix the words, but even so, everything's happening above board at that point, which is really important. Even if you have to write something you're not thrilled with, even if you're always the one who has to make the fix, and I jokingly call that Dansky's first rule of game writing, which is words are always the cheapest fix until they're suddenly the most expensive, which is what happens after you record them. But even then, everybody's clear and there's no surprises. I have gotten some of those surprises over the years, and it has had a negative effect on the game, and both on a game level and on, honestly, a financial level as well.
Something I noticed, like, as you were talking about, like, sending descriptions to said artist, you included the idea of visual references. When you said that, are you talking about, like, drawing it yourself and stuff like that?
Whatever works. If you can find, a character from a movie that gets the point across, you pull that image off Google. If you have to sketch it yourself, you sketch it yourself. Whatever works. Use all the tools at your disposal. And I will say this: when we were putting together the casting notes and the character design notes for Dominica, the villain in Assassin's Creed Nexus, I pulled up a visual reference of the actress Marina Baccarin from Firefly and V and Deadpool because I wanted the character to have her haircut.
There you go.
We ended up casting Marina Baccarin to play the role.
Awesome!
Okay, so 1, 2.
Okay, so I earlier asked a question about like AAAs and indies and how much control you have and how different they feel when you're writing within them. Are we able to get to that? Because you said you wanted to save it for the end. And I do have a second question, but wait for that.
Okay. Look, the bigger the project, the less control you have.
Right.
Because the more money that's being poured into it, and the more people who want to oversee what happens to that money, and the more cautious people are generally. So what you do to establish control over what you can is you build those good feedback loops. You build a good relationship with your producer to protect your writing. You build a good relationship with your lead, so your lead will go to bat for you when someone else in another department maybe says something crazy. And look, at the end of the day, if senior management says, hey, we know you've been working on this game with this setting for 2 years, but we've decided we want you to make these 20 changes last minute, so you got 6 months, go. There's nothing you can do about it. and then you just try and find solutions. But on the day-to-day, you work with everyone to build those protective structures that let you present your stuff in a way that you are driving the conversation.
Question, with like indies, I feel like this is just a sub question in the first one. Do you guys like, I mean, obviously you have more control, but how much more stuff do you have to do? Because there's a chance that you might be like the only writer on the team or something.
If there's fewer people on the team, there's less stuff to do on a certain, there's less different stuff to do.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, there's fewer feedback loops you have to set up and things like that. There's more, your tasks may be larger individually, but you're not talking to as many people and not spinning as many plates. And in that case, ideally you're on the team because the people you're working with know you and trust you. And you know, as they've worked with you, they've gotten to see that you are doing good work and can be trusted, and you have a good feedback dialogue with them. And so there you can really drive the conversation by saying, hey, I want to do this, here are the benefits, here's how it would impact what you guys are doing, but I think, you know, this will give us a stronger game in these ways. What do you think? So that's the level of control that you should be looking to do. The one thing you never want to do, and this is something that a lot of people who are not writers accuse writers of doing, is, well, the writer wants to come in and be in charge of the whole thing. I have never known a good game writer who's thought that in the slightest. Occasionally you get that when someone who's not a game writer, who is somebody's friend or a hotshot from another industry, comes in and they don't understand how to work with a team, and they think the rest of the team is there to tell their story. It's not. It is never our story, it's the player's story. We are building the props and the sets and the costumes and the lightings and the scenery and everything else so that the player interacts with the stuff we've made. They are telling their story in the moment, and every player's story is different. It's not our story to tell, and nobody who does this job, who understands this job, wants to be in charge on that level. And so always give pushback to that.
Sorry, if you have time, I just wanted to let you keep going since you said that you were on a schedule for this, so I can ask my question afterwards.
Okay, well, look, we have 8 minutes officially in the time slot, and then I have this room for another hour for selling books and autographing books and
that's convenient.
So why don't we take the questions and move them to the end of the hour, and I will finish my prepared spiel, if that is cool with everybody?
I think so.
All right. Let me figure out what the heck I have in my notes.
Actually, would you like another bottle of water, by the way?
No, I'm still working on this one. What I would like is scotch, but that's probably a bad idea.
That's a later
A
issue.
little bit difficult to get that.
That's mid-lecture? No, that's a bad idea.
Crazy.
I don't know a thing. No, that would be wrong. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about deadlines now. And this goes back to working with your producer. Nobody does their best work under too tight deadlines. All right, you know, we all think, oh no, the crunch, you know, the deadline really inspires me. That works sometimes. You don't want it to be the base state of affairs. You don't want them to expect that the miracle you pulled out of your butt today is the same miracle you pull out every day, 5 days a week for 12 months. All right? You don't want to establish beast mode as the baseline. And because your work diminishes as you do that. The well of creativity cannot be pumped at full efficiency 24/7. It needs time to reload, it needs time to refill, it needs time to recharge. And honestly, writing fast is not always your best writing. There are moments when the muse gives you that bottle of Jolt Cola, if I may use a very dated reference. And there are times when the muse sits back and goes, no, let's think about this. And that needs to be communicated as well. Our process as writers is not something that really lends itself great to JIRA tickets, let's be honest here. And there's a lot of people who are worried about velocity and word count per day and things like that. And we all know that's not how the job actually works. It works, sometimes you spend 2 days doing research, watching YouTube videos on a specific historic battle that you are going to be referencing. And there are days when you still stare into space, arguing with a character voice, and there's days when you write stuff you throw out. And then there's days when you write 3,000 words of dialogue in a single afternoon because you finally got it in the lightnings of the bottle. And that drives producers nuts. But if you can get ahead of that curve, if you can sit down with your producers as a writer and say, here is what I'm actually going to need to do this task. Here is how long this is going to take me for my process to deliver this. in a reasonable time, and it allows for creation and feedback and iteration and polish, then you are ahead of the game, and you will make better stuff, and you will do better work, and you will be happier. All right? Now the thing is, writing is the thing that always gets crunched. And why does that happen? Well, it's because we have an immovable backend. We have 2 customers downstream from us, localization and recording, that can't move. Okay? You hire a recording studio, well, they're booked. You cannot just move the dates because they are probably booked for something else. And that will be very expensive. And expensive things make producers mad. And you cannot just rebook actors because they're probably booked for something else. They're not sitting around waiting for you. And so once that gets locked in, it's locked. Meantime, you may have scheduled, hey, 2 months for the writing, awesome. But level design is a little slow and they take 2 extra weeks. And mission design is a little slow and they take 2 extra weeks. And then there's a redesign that takes 2 weeks. And suddenly you've got 2 weeks to write the whole game. And that happens a lot. And so being on the back end of that, being on the reactive end of that, makes for worse games. It makes for worse writing, it makes for worse time for the writer, it makes for worse product. What you have to do is you have to get out in front of it. And again, that's something I talk about here. You have to go to your producers early. You have to make it clear what your job actually entails, what you are doing, so that they don't walk by your desk and say, they're just sending you to space. Clearly, they're not working hard enough. You have to explain the difference between writing and typing, and you have to build schedules with enough time. You have to have a reasonable grasp of what the deliverables are going to be and how long each of those takes to write well and how much time they're going to need in the back end, and you need to fight for that. And I don't mean yell and scream, I mean you need to take this to your producers and say, this is what we need for the sake of the game, not because I'm being precious or anything else like that. And between you and me, and let's turn the camera off for a second, overestimate a little bit so you have a fallback position that's actually working. Sorry. But the point being is that you need to establish a space to allow yourself to do good work. And this is something that writers traditionally have not done. We have always just been thrown into the fire with, okay, it's time to write now, go! And the time estimates are, how long does it take you to type this? Not how long does it take you to write this? And we have to push back against that, starting before we write the very first word, to allow us to write a first word that is also our best word. Does that make sense to everybody? And you notice I have not talked at all about writing technique in here. There's a ton of books about writing technique, and there's a few bits in here. There's a few exercises I mentioned. There's something I do called the 10 words exercise, whereby if you're writing a character, do a list of 10 words or phrases they will say and why, and 10 words or phrases they won't say and why, and that goes a long way towards defining character voice and character description and everything else. There's a few of those in there, but there's a lot of great books about that stuff.
Do you personally have a book on writing technique?
I do not. I seriously considered writing one, and then I realized that this was more valuable, really. And I do a series of LinkedIn posts twice a week on game writing and game narrative, and there's a lot of technique stuff in that space. So if you're looking for those tips, I highly recommend checking those out. And I also do a bunch of stuff on game writing over my Patreon.
Your Patreon.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. But yeah, where was I? Schedule, yes, all that good stuff. We have to give ourselves the best chance to succeed. And that means, again, so much more than just the words. And again, writing those words is what is at the heart of our craft. It is what we do, it is our special talent, it is our calling. But we also have to give those words the best chance to succeed. Just shoving them out of the nest and hoping they fly on their own doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do the words any good. It doesn't do the games any good. What you have to do is support your writing. Support the actual creation of words in a way that leads to them having the best chance to succeed, to you enjoying what you are doing, to being in a good creative space where you feel like you're contributing and you feel like you're doing your best work instead of just putting out fires. Okay. Be with you in 1 second. Okay. So we are at 1 o'clock, so let me wrap this up and then we can do questions and books and fun stuff like that. So the real takeaway is this. This book is about how to survive in the role. It's how to do the things that will make your life easier. It's how to explain to the people you work with what you need to do the job well and how that makes everyone's life and the game better. And it's not about some insane notion of writers should be in charge. Like I said, nobody thinks that. Nobody wants the game writers in charge. The game writers don't want to be in charge. I don't want to be in charge. I don't want to have a meeting with engineers, okay? They're great people. They do great work. I don't understand what they do at all, and I am happy for them to go make magic, right? I want to collaborate with all these smart people to make something awesome. And I want to do it in the best way possible for all of us, okay? So, yeah, here's the book. Take it, read it, find the bits that are applicable to your situation, that speak to you, that inspire you, that make you go, yeah, I was there, and then pick them up and apply them to your work. Take them forward, build on them, share what you do with that. And that's the most important thing, so we all move forward together, all right? And that way we can make this better for us as writers, for our professional peers in other departments, for our players. And that's, I think, what we all want. Thank you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take some questions and then I'll put the books out if anybody wants to nab a copy.
Can you do me a favor? Can you just hold the book up for the camera?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I'm going to hold up the paperback because the hardback cover is just ugly.
All right. Just do that.
Yeah, I was wondering if like we take questions and then maybe we can have like at the very end like a picture with everyone. Or...
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to. Yes. Okay. So first question.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned earlier on that you also worked extensively with tabletop games, especially.
Yes.
And I was wondering what the overlapping bridges that you came to experience between tabletop writing and then video game writing, and what kind of, I'll say, influenced your decision-making process or strategic thinking for how you develop your workflows across both mediums.
Okay, that is a great question. And the huge advantage of working in tabletop RPGs and LARPs, because I was also in charge of the LARPs for White Wolf for many years, doing the Mind's Eye Theater stuff. So if you have seen people walking around coffee houses pretending to be vampires, that is partially my fault. But the thing is, that taught me to write interactively. That taught me to write for the player, where I was putting stuff out there that the players could then pick up and run with and tell their own stories with. And that really was a head start that a lot of folks coming from linear media into video game writing didn't have, and I really appreciate it. Now the big difference is that tabletop, by and large, you are building the world out. Everything is outward directed. You write a book about a city or a type of vampire or whatever else, and then you give that to the players to tell their story and expand on the world you give them. You do not prescribe them. There's not a specific ending. Even a Dungeons and Dragons module is not the end of the game. It's just the end of that chapter of the game, and then they go off and pillage an entire other underground ecosystem. Sorry, did I say that out loud? But in video games, everything has to be directed towards what is in the game. What you do, and this is the phrasing that I use for it, you have to marry the narrative fantasy to the gameplay fantasy, so that your story and your characterization makes the player want to do the things the game does well. When I wrote Splinter Cell games, I was writing stories that made you want to be sneaky and climb along pipes and grab people out of the shadows and do that, because the game did that really well. I did not write games that made you want to do a Bollywood dance number. That would have been awkward. And we didn't have the animations for it, so there we go. But that difference was really important. And what it always came back to was having that base understanding of putting the player's story first. And that has informed everything I have done as a video game writer because of that, particularly, honestly, the LARP stuff. I don't know how many folks here have LARPed? Okay, well, a vampire LARP is generally a whole mess of people dressed up like vampires, each telling their own story. And the thing is, the way it's set up, it's great in that they can tell their own stories without needing somebody there to tell them what their story should be. You wind them up with a character and a motivation and a setting that everybody understands, and you let them go, and people bounce off each other and tell their own stories and have their own interactions, and it's great.
So it's improv.
And
So it's like improv.
Yeah, basically.
very much, it's improv with a rule set. And in the case of live action vampire, with rock, paper, scissors. I can tell you a very funny story about doing live action vampire for a television show one time. Yeah, okay, so digression there. This was back when I was at White Wolf, and we had just had the vampire murders, which were horrible incident, obviously, where a couple kids killed parents. And then they took off in a van for New Orleans, and that van was filled with Disney movies, Anne Rice novels, and White Wolf, Vampire the Masquerade source books. So naturally, we had the worst lawyers of the bunch. So, and they got caught because one of the kids in the van kept on calling home to reassure his parents it was all right, and they eventually got caught and arrested. But this, of course, became a big thing with shows like America's Most Wanted. And they came to the White Wolf Studios to see what it was all about. And so I was put in charge of our response, which I have no idea why that happened, but it happened. And so I put together a bunch of our best local vampire LARPers who had great costumes and set them up to perform for the camera crew. And the camera crew was one very serious reporter and one very mellow cameraman who was like, this place is great. The last time we went somewhere, the floors were sticky. But the reporter was very intent on getting to the bottom of this.
Camera people, rad.
Yeah. And so she was there and very focused, and we got our LARPers up in front of the room, and they started LARPing, and it comes to a big moment of confrontation, you know, with big guys doing big acting, and it came time for conflict resolution. And what most people don't know is that conflict resolution in Vampire the Masquerade live action role playing is rock, paper, scissors. And so the big guys are, and I'm standing next to the reporter, and I can very clearly hear her say, "Oh fuck, they're just nerds." So, yeah.
Was the reporter wrong though?
No, but you know, we were nerds having fun. And I will say this, the Vampire LARP stuff did a tremendous amount actually to bridge a lot of the traditional gender gap in the role-playing space, whereby the best statistics we had, and this was a very long time ago, was that Vampire LARP games were roughly 50-50 male-female. And that was a lot more diverse than tabletop, and even just the tabletop Vampire the Masquerade had increased the gender diversity of the audience base. So, but okay, that's a really long way to answer your question, saying it's about the interactivity. I learned the interactivity. Not everything applies, but the lessons of do this for the player. What does the player get out of this? Is this useful? Does this need to be written now? All of that applies. And then for tabletop, I still write outward, and for video games, I always write towards what the game is trying to achieve and does well, so as to not have people not look at the backside of the cardboard architecture, as it were.
Absolutely.
Make sense?
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So I know you mentioned voice directors and actors, and something I was thinking about is I was wondering how you guys would set references to the character voice, and obviously they're giving descriptions, but how would you communicate with the voice directors and voice actors?
Okay. What you do before any of this happens is you write what's called sides.
Yeah.
And what you write lines for the actors to audition with, and you write notes. You do a little write-up of who the character is and where they came from and things like that. And you give them that material to work with. And you leave that in their hands. And then the follow-up, you go with, ideally you're involved in the recording, and you sit there. You never talk directly to the actor. You should always go through the director. Actors do not want multiple voices in their ears, and you don't speak their professional language.
Correct.
So if you have notes, you give them to the director, and the director can communicate them appropriately. At the same time, you're there if they have questions. What does this line mean? Where is this coming from? What should I be feeling here? You are there to help. And if they stumble on a line, you are there to do a rewrite. I will say, technically, I highly, highly recommend reading every line you write out loud. 90% of the time I've seen a line go bad in the studio, it's because there's precisely one syllable too many, and it throws off the actor's natural rhythm. So, but if you're there, you can rewrite on the fly. Don't be precious, make sure it works. As long as the meaning of the line is conveyed. If the actor comes up with a reading and it works, run with it. All right? That's what they're there to do. Your text is not sacred.
Well, literally piggybacking off of this idea, because I find myself in the weird position of trying to be the person who merges these two worlds. As a burgeoning voice talent, what would you, as a professional from the writing perspective, try and instill in someone like me to try and be mindful of going forward? Given that there's still a lot that I would like to be aware of prior to going into projects.
One, be aware that decisions were made for this character and for this voice were decisions. There's a reason for them. Two, always be willing to ask why. What is behind this? Okay, this character doesn't use contractions. Why don't they? Things like that. And just a good writer will give you information and not drown you in it and not expect you to know all of it, but will leave the door open for you to ask for more if you want it.
Because building that character voice is, integral for it to feel authentic.
Yeah, that's what that 10 words exercise is for, absolutely. And
I apologize if this question's a little redundant, but I'm kind of new to the industry.
don't never apologize for the question, okay?
So, like, I was thinking about how oftentimes you might hear about like the writer for said series, like the writer for The Legend of Zelda or something like that. But then you also hear about people who are writers like, I worked on this game and this game and that game. And I was wondering, like, how does that change the whole situation? Like, between just spending all your time in one series versus constantly moving from series to series, is that even something to consider? And like, how does that change the whole situation?
Okay, I have worked on Rainbow Six, Ghost Recon, Splinter Cell, The Division, Hawks, End War, Far Cry, Might and Magic, Assassin's Creed, Cold Fear, Hunt Showdown. I can go on, all right? There is something absolutely awesome about moving from game to game, genre to genre, doing different stuff. And it lets you stretch and lets you build and lets you experiment with your skill and your talent. That being said, there will be games that you are not a good fit for, that you will not be good at writing, that you don't want to write for, and that's okay. I would be the worst writer ever for a dating sim. Do not hire me to write a dating sim, okay? If nothing else, my dating history should warn you off from that. And that's okay, but if you have the opportunity to work on a game that's not something you've worked on before, and you think you can bring something cool to it, by all means, reach out and grab it. I mean, okay, I did Tom Clancy for 23 years. But even within Tom Clancy, there were a whole lot of different flavors of it. And on top of that, I got to do the world building for Might and Magic. I got to contribute to For Honor. I got to work on 2 car racing games. And I'm like the least car guy ever. But it was fascinating to learn that stuff. And I got to work on a bullet hell side-scroller called Outland. That was fantastic, and it was completely out of my wheelhouse. And I love doing that. And I have embraced all those, and I think you should too. And the flip side of that is that odds are you are not going to get your dream gig right on the start of the industry. And there's a very good chance you'll work on, say, High School Musical, the game. And that's okay. Go in there, take what you can from that, learn what you can from that, and apply it to the next one. Even if it's a game that's not in your wheelhouse, find something in it that's cool. And then you are a game writer. You are a professional published game writer. And that is something to be really proud of and you can take forward. And I'll jump on one other thing from there. Say, anybody here who uses the word aspiring game writer, stop it. If you are writing, you are a game writer. You may not be a professional game writer yet if you haven't been paid for it. You may not be a published game writer yet if your game hasn't come out, but you are a game writer. Lose the word aspiring from your vocabulary, all right?
From the peanut gallery, the moment you make money, always call yourself a professional.
Yes.
Always.
Okay, and we're going to take a short break here while I get the books out, and then I will answer more questions.